Travel during COVID-19? Yes, that's what I said. Pet sitting clients are traveling more this year than they were earlier in 2020. While you pack your bags and plan your trip, I'm here to help you create a list of items to not forget to give your pet sitter. That's today's topic, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome to the Collar Club Podcast, your number one source for the advice, information, and guidance you need to have a healthier relationship with your pet. Now, here's your host, Nikki Musko.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Collar Club Podcast. I'm Nikki Musko, and thank you for being here. While you're here, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast if you're listening on Apple Podcast. Please give us those 5 stars and a written review. I absolutely love and appreciate when you do so. Thank you very much. If you're not following us on social media, we would love to see you and your pets, so go ahead and follow us at Official Collar Club on all social media profiles. I would also love to have you in my inner circle at thecollarclub.com. That's TheCollarClub.com. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter and receive tips, tricks, and thoughts on the pet industry. All right, so let's get started. Today's podcast, I want to touch on at least 10 things to get together to make a smooth transition for your pet and your pet sitter. I don't know about you, but I'm a list maker, and I know when I travel, I'm running around frantically, making sure I don't forget anything. And I've been in the position before, I'll already be on the road to the airport, and I remember I forgot something. So if you do end up forgetting something on your next trip, I want to make sure it's not anything regarding your pet. That's the worst feeling. Also, as I go through my checklist for you, I'm taking a look here at my notes, and I'll have some real life pet sitter experiences that happened to me that you won't want to miss. So number 1, information about your pet. It's easy to remember the basics, not always easy to remember the details, such as your pet's unique routines and characteristics. Inform your sitter about your dog's daily routines. So this would be the how, the when, what they eat, favorite things to do during the day. Maybe even let your sitter know your dog's favorite toys or games to play. Your pet's quirks are always good to know. Safety is another detail I like to discuss with clients. Does your dog get along with the neighbor's dog? Are there any dogs to be mindful of in the neighborhood that maybe your dog doesn't get along with? Or maybe it's actually the dog's neighbor that's unfriendly. Are there cats that come around in your yard? Are there any predators your sitter should know about, such as coyotes? There are so many what ifs, and it's important for your sitter to know what you know. The more information your pet sitter has, the better care your pet will receive. Number 2, a list of your pet's conditions and medications. No matter if you've been using the same pet sitter for a period of time or you hired a new sitter, this one area you want to make sure you communicate if anything's changed or not. Provide your pet's information and also an emergency vet as a backup. Backup vets are good to have if an emergency arises during your primary vet's off hours. It doesn't happen too often, but it's always best to be prepared. Let your sitter know if your pet has recently been on any medications or treatments. This would be good for the pet sitter to know in case there are after effects from the medication or treatment, or if the underlying issue comes back while you're away. If you plan to have your pet on medication or a treatment while you're away, please make sure to discuss this with your sitter before your trip. Even if you hired a professional sitter and they are the best sitter in the world, you want to make sure whatever your pet's routine is for a treatment, that the sitter, you, and your pet are all comfortable and on the same page. Another good reason to discuss with your sitter about any medical treatment is you need to know if your sitter has experience with your pet's specific treatment plan provided by the vet. If your pet sitter is not familiar with the vet's treatment plan, this is the perfect time to schedule an adequate number of visits with you and your pet prior to leaving for your trip. Number 3, emergency information. As I stated in number 2, have your vet's information at hand, such as facility name, address, and phone number. I also suggest to clients to provide their spouse's name and phone number as well. I always consider you and your spouse as one contact, even though you have 2 different numbers. If you are traveling together, I like to have at least 2 emergency contacts for the sitter to be able to reference. Your contacts do not need to live near your home. It's nice to have, but not always realistic. Emergency contacts come handy when you or your spouse can not be reached, and the sitter is left to make a quick decision. And it could be anything regarding your pet or your home. I'll share a quick story with you. One day, I walked into a home, and a dog's head was bleeding so bad. And I kid you not. Remember when you were in school, in the drinking fountain, you hit a button, and the water comes out in a U shape? This is how the blood was coming out of the dog's head. And this was the first pet sitting visit for this client. The tile floor was covered in so much blood, I felt like I was ice skating in order to get to the dog. The floor was just so slippery. It was clearly a main artery. I don't know how long the dog was bleeding or even why the dog was bleeding. It couldn't have been long since it was so much blood and coming out so rapidly. Anyway, I called the owner, no answer. I called his wife, no answer. I called emergency contact number 1, no answer. I called emergency contact number 2 and finally received an answer. It must have been pure luck that day that the emergency contact was a nurse who works in ER at a normal hospital, and she was able to coach me through what to do in such a traumatic situation, which really came down to life or death for this dog. Long story short, I rushed the dog to the vet since I had all the information already on file, and everything ended up turning out just fine. So later on, I received phone calls from both owners, which they were each traveling for business on completely separate different flights. The moral of the story is, you never know what will happen. Always best to be over than underprepared. If I didn't have all the emergency contacts that I had, what would have happened? And this helps lead us right into our next number on our checklist. Number 4, important contact information. Not only do you want to vet in your emergency contact information on hand for your sitter, but also, if you live in an apartment complex, it's great to have a point of contact and any phone numbers of the complex. Also, I know some complexes, they have those emergency numbers for off hours in case something goes wrong. So sometimes keys or fobs, when given to us, don't always work. Or maybe there's an issue possibly with something in your apartment, such as a water leak. And I'm sure I'm not the only person here, but it always seems like cell phones don't always work when you really need them. They seem to act up at the worst time possible. It may be a good idea if you're staying at a hotel to provide your hotel contact information, since the hotels have a landline and that won't act up at all like a cell phone would. Number 5, your itinerary. Let your sitter know the time of your departure and when you plan to come home. It's always best to have this in writing somewhere and not just verbal. So I would suggest through a text message or an email. Sometimes wrong times can be said, so it's always nice to be able to look back and reference what you told your pet sitter on what time you plan to be back home. I've seen somebody will say, oh, it's Wednesday, and then they'll say the 17th, when really they meant maybe Thursday the 17th. Things get misconstrued. If for some reason your flight gets delayed or you're not arriving home when you said you would, please be sure to communicate with your sitter as soon as possible. Even if it's a maybe, it's always best to give your sitter a heads up. Providing that notice is really helpful for everyone involved. Sitters sometimes will have jobs scheduled back to back. Not always, but sometimes. Or you really don't even know what your sitter possibly may have planned anyways. This is the last visit and they're going on vacation. Who knows? So if your sitter's unable to help, then you can always call a neighbor or try to work something out with your sitter. Number 6, access to all supplies. Be sure to have enough supplies for your pet. The most common supply that a sitter may not have enough of is food for them, meaning for your pet. Also, be sure the sitter knows where to find everything they may need that's necessary. For new clients, I like to schedule a meet and greet before service starts to go over all details. This gives you and the sitter time to do a walkthrough of your home. And this way you can point out the placement of items your sitter may need. And also if the sitter comes up with questions as well. I would go over location of cleaning supplies. That's always really good to know. If for some reason you hired a sitter at the last minute and are unable to coordinate a time for the sitter to come by before you leave, take video of where the necessary supplies are located and send those to your pet sitter. Don't just write it out or tell them, because it's easy to not have a full understanding. Also, if I'm doing cat care and the cat is shy, I always would like to know where their hiding places are in the home. Not to taunt them or anything, but just good to know that they're alive, to check on them. Number 7, keys to a fully prepared home. Actually, the word keys just reminded me of a necessary topic that may be a little off subject here, but it's extremely important. Be sure to test your keys before handing them off to your pet sitter. I've been in situations before where the client had keys made and none of them worked. Or I've actually also have had where the owner ended up giving me the wrong key. If you prefer to not use a key as the primary way to access your home, such as a garage code, I still recommend providing your sitter a backup key. Power can go out, or if the battery dies. This way, the sitter still has a way to get into your home to care for your pets. If you have a door code, these are becoming more popular these days. So just make sure that the sitter's comfortable and knows how to use your door code. They're all very different. I would also recommend a backup key for this too. I've seen some of the door codes have technical issues. It's really rare, but I've seen it. Okay, sorry, I got off topic there, but that's an important piece I didn't want to leave out in today's episode. So now going back on topic, your pet sitter's only job is to care for your pet. So handing them keys to a clean and safe home is essential. Imagine arriving to your hotel, you're excited, and you open your hotel room, and the place is filthy. I promise you, pet sitters have the same reaction. A detail that pet owners don't think about that's really important to prepare is to prepare your home and to take care of any of the safety hazards that are around, such as any potentially dangerous chemicals. You will want to set these out of your dog's reach, or even cat. I swear, dogs sometimes believe it's a party when the owner is away, just like a teenager. Or as the old saying goes, while the cats are away, the mice come out to play. I'm kidding. But this is how we see it. But for the dog or cat, the poor behavior comes out of anxiety when you're away. So something a dog never touched or thought about getting into while you're home, that moment you're away and the dog decides to eat one of your plants, which could potentially be poisonous. I've seen it, and it can happen. Other items you may want to think about would be any cleaning supplies, ant traps or insect killers, rat poison, or anything else that your dog could potentially get into. Oh, also, this is a good one, and not many people think about this. Repair any fence holes and secure all gates before you leave. If your dog believes he's the pack leader of the family, which is, for body language, it's difficult for the average person to read that. You may not know, or you may, but the dog, they'll get worried about the members of their pack, and they try to search for you. So even if your dog never tries to escape your fenced-in yard, they might while you're away. And this could be really dangerous and not a phone call a pet sitter wants to call you about. I've also had clients tell me they have an invisible fence, but it's not on. And don't worry, my dogs won't leave my yard. They believe the invisible fence is working. This is the biggest baloney. I've seen dogs break the line when they see a squirrel, dogs that took off in search of their owner. Here's another piece of advice. If you moved into a new home and you just got an invisible fence installed, make sure, tell your pet sitter your dog must be on a leash. I've seen a dog with the invisible fence collar on and everything is running completely smoothly. However, the dog's scared or wants to go search for its owner when you're gone. And the dog doesn't care if the invisible fence is on. They take off anyway. Here's a great story, and I have so many of them. But this one will hit home with you about making sure you have a pet-safe home before your sitter arrives. I had a client who was here in the United States for a short period of time and was temporarily living in a rented home. The couple rescued these 2 cats here in the U.S., their brother and sister, so from the same litter. I believe the cat at this point, when I was hired for cat care, they were about 2 years old. So still really young. And for those that don't understand cats, an adult's around 4 years old. Anyway, I walked in to provide cat care, and I thought someone broke into the home. Plates were shattered all over the kitchen floor. Drawers were open everywhere in the house. Paper, which looked like paper towels, were shredded into tiny pieces, all on the first floor of the home, which definitely looked like an entire roll. Now, the cats were fine, but every dish was broken and on the floor. The owners didn't have dishes sitting out. They didn't seem like they had a film of grease or anything on them. They felt really clean. But I found out from the owners that their cats get mad when they leave the house. So this is apparently a reoccurring situation. Now, I don't think cats get mad, or dogs. I believe they have a lot of anxiety when their owners are gone on a trip. My point is, this was never mentioned to me or my staff. Also, if this type of behavior was common for the cats, it's also dangerous. What if one of the cats walked on the broken glass or dishes and cut a paw pad? What if the cat ingested the majority of the paper towel roll, or even decided to chew on the glass? It's an extreme situation, but one like this, if I were the owner, I would have prepared my kitchen cabinets with child locks so the cats wouldn't get into them. I would have also made sure bathroom doors were closed so the cat didn't get toilet paper. And I would have also put the paper towels into the kitchen cabinets with the child locks. I'll leave number 7 at that story. It's a great lesson to learn from, that's for sure. So prepare your house for your pet sitter. Number 8, a list of house rules. Just because you aren't around does not give your dog permission to sleep in your bed or drink from the toilet. Now, if these are house rules that you don't have, it's okay. I'm not judging you. You get my point. I'm sure you do have house rules of some sort. So whatever those rules are, you want to make sure these are communicated with your pet sitter. It's important for your sitter to know when your dog is and not allowed to do in your home. The worst feeling is coming back to a pet that has lost all discipline you have ever taught him. My dog is a perfect example. In my house, I have a rule that no dogs are allowed on furniture. Go ahead, you can judge me. It's fine. I got home from a trip, and all of a sudden, my dog is very comfortable on my living room couch with his cute little eyes and his little button nose. I tell him all the time, good thing you're cute. Anyways, I spoke to the sitter and asked if my dog hung out on the couch with her while I was away. The sitter said, yes, he came up on the couch and laid next to me. It was so cute, and he's such a love bug. I'm glad they enjoyed their time together. However, I was so mad at my dog. Now, this is not the pet sitter's fault by any means, or really my dog's fault. I did not communicate this detail with the sitter. I had to break this new developed bad habit of my dog, which was an easy thing to fix, just annoying to come home to after a long trip. Number 9, an authorization letter. In case there's ever an emergency and your dog needs to go to the vet while you're away, you'll want to make sure your pet receives the necessary care. Contact your vet, have a credit card placed on file. Also, write or print out a very short authorization letter stating while you're away traveling, you have hired so-and-so to care for Fluffy, and in case of an emergency, you give authorization for your pet sitter to bring your pet to the vet, and make sure in the letter to state yours and your pet sitter's full name. So here's another story for you. I was pet sitting an older dog. We were relaxing in the living room, and I looked down while the dog is laying on the floor, and I noticed blood coming out of his nose. I contacted the owner, and she also thought it was really strange and asked I take him to the vet. It was after hours of her primary vet, so she asked I take him to the local emergency clinic. I arrived at the vet, and they refused to provide treatment because I wasn't the owner. It turned into a mess and delayed proper care for the dog, which actually did turn into an emergency. Turns out there was a large tumor in the dog's nose that needed to be removed and began to cause the dog breathing issues. If I had an authorization letter, the dog would have received care sooner, and also the poor owner wouldn't have had to take time out of her vacation to convince the emergency clinic she was the owner of the dog. I was actually really surprised in how awful this emergency clinic was treating me, and also, and mostly, how awful they were treating my client, the dog's owner. This clinic made it so difficult, and myself and my staff, we take pets to the vet on a regular basis, especially if the owner is at work and is unable to take the dog to the vet for an appointment. So to me, it wasn't a big deal at the time to not have an authorization letter. Well, here we are, time caught up, obviously. So don't make the same mistake I did, and be sure to have an authorization letter. When those moments come, it's worth it. Number 10, information about your visitors. Make a list of names and dates of anyone coming into your home while you're away. Now, I've had clients, and I'm sure you've had maybe friends or your neighbors, you're asking them to kind of, just make sure that the sitter's doing what they're supposed to while you're away. Which is totally cool. just make sure that you still provide those names on a list. Other names you may want to have on the list would be house staff, pool cleaners, gardeners, or contractors. Also, like I had already mentioned, just make sure that you're putting your neighbor, friend, or one of your parents, if they plan to come by to check on your home, make sure their name's on the list as well. You don't want unexpected guests to stress out the sitter, or also, for another reason, just as they don't belong there in the first place. This is the last story for today's podcast, and I have so many to share. So, but it's so important to make a list of your visitors. I was scheduled to pet sit for these 2 dogs. The first day, I was super excited to see these 2 dogs, as they were some of my favorites. So I randomly decided to go a couple hours before I was scheduled to arrive. And I had a good relationship with this client, and so I knew that they wouldn't have cared. I pulled into the home to take care of the family's 2 dogs. And as I was pulling up in the driveway, which when you pull up the driveway, the further up the drive, it turns into the back of the home. So as I was pulling up further, there was a white SUV. Now, I was aware they had a cleaning lady, but I wasn't sure which days. Anyway, I pulled my car up slowly, and I noticed a man standing by the back door. So I'm thinking, okay, something's off. This was, I believe, in February a few years ago. So there was snow on the ground, and this man was sweating. And I mean, sweat was running down his face. The dogs are normally barkers, and I didn't hear the dogs, which was really strange. I put my car into reverse with my foot on the brake. I put my passenger window down, only a small crack. And I yelled out, "Hey, what are you doing here? I live here." The man was startled and he started to run at my car. I didn't know if this man had a gun or a knife. I had no idea. So as he's running towards my car, I ended up peeling out of that driveway so fast in reverse, and he got up pretty close to my car as I'm already in the street. So once he got pretty close up to my car, I think he actually remembered that he had his car still in the drive. So he kind of just stopped and he yells, sorry, wrong house. And my heart rate at this point was so high. And so he then peels out of the driveway and takes off. It happened only in a matter of a few seconds. And the animal lover I am, I quickly got into the house because I didn't hear the dogs. So of course my mind went to, did he shoot them? Are they alive? Are they hurt? I ended up finding the 2 dogs inside and in one of the corners of the home. They were certainly startled. I was startled. They knew something was obviously wrong. And both dogs had this frightened look on their face, and as they were leaning against one another, I calmed them down, did a quick physical exam, and they were okay. So then I started to search the house, and nothing looked touched. I checked all the windows. They were locked. I checked all the doors. They were locked. I went toward the back door where I saw the man originally, and I touched the door. I put my hand on it, and it made a loud crack noise, and I barely put any pressure on. So he almost got into the house. Now, I have a theory. I believe he was probably coming off of some kind of drug, and he was searching for quick money during the day to keep his drug habit going. Now, someone was watching over me and the dogs that day. And like I said earlier, I came a couple hours earlier than my scheduled time for no reason, really, other than I missed the dogs and I wanted to hang out with the dogs sooner than later, and I couldn't wait to see them. So I called the owner, asked if they had anyone scheduled to be at the home. They said, well, we do have several contractors to remodel our home. However, we ended up pushing back their scheduled time since we're taking a trip, and they will start when we come back home. No cleaning lady was scheduled, by the way, either. So I guess second moral of the story is don't tell your hired contractors you're pushing back the dates for when you come back from vacation. I don't believe the homeowners went with these contractors, since clearly that was some shady contractor working for that company. I know I would have canceled service before it even started. That's probably the most wild story I have, and a great reason for your sitter to know who's coming in and out of your home. You know, what if I handled the situation differently and asked who he was, and he said he was scheduled to be there to do some construction work? I could have called the owners with the man standing there in order for me to confirm permission for this man to enter the home. And who knows what he would have done. You know, I had another situation with a pet sitter. She was staying overnight, and there was only a 1-bedroom. There was 1 mattress, so she ended up sleeping on the couch in the living room. And it was in the middle of the night. I don't even know what time. It had to have been maybe 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So anyways, her boyfriend ended up coming in. He had a key to her apartment, and he wanted to surprise her because he lives out of town. So of course it startled my pet sitter, and he was startled. She was startled. Anyways, I'm just glad nobody had a weapon on hand because that could have not been pretty. A little preparation goes a long way for you, your pet sitter, and your sitter. That's all I have for today at the Collar Club podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I will be back next week on Wednesday. We will be releasing a new episode every Wednesday. So be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. That way, no matter where I am in the world, whenever I upload the podcast, it will automatically download to your smartphone or to your tablet. You can learn more and receive our newsletter at thecollarclub.com. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media, whether it be Instagram or Facebook. You can find us at Official Collar Club. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and see you next week.
Thank you for joining us for the Collar Club podcast, brought to you by the Empire Podcast Network. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast to be notified every time a brand new episode is uploaded. For more information, visit thecollarclub.com.